Every journey begins with a single step. But what is it that gets us to finally take that step? This question had found itself upon me after I'd played Journey on my PS3 back in middle school. This rather simple game created by That Game Company in 2012 had influenced me so much. And today, I want to finally give this game the spotlight it deserves for everything that it means to me. Come along with me as we delve into the journey that changed me and the history of the ones who crafted it. It's the year 2005, and a group of master's students at the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts have just released a short video game titled Cloud. It followed the story of a young boy who was bedridden in a hospital and dreams of flying through the clouds over a group of islands, manipulating them as he twirls and twists throughout the air. Cloud was a short experience, only having about 4 missions to complete for its full runtime, but clearly the game didn't need much in the way of playable content, as it won many awards and received positive reception from across the board with millions of eyes and hundreds of thousands of plays. Although it had been so positively received, the original purpose of the game was to be an experiment, to create a game that wasn't so heavily focused on its gameplay and its mechanics, and be a game that evokes emotion and gets player to experience a feeling of youthfulness, freedom, and the wonder of imagination. This can be seen with the game's story, as its short and simple premise is designed to get the player emotionally invested without having it be too much and distract the player from the experience that they were trying to craft. And an experience they crafted. As mentioned before, the reception for Cloud was not just good, it was phenomenal, winning several awards and getting featured on networks such as Spike TV, CBS Sunday, and G4 TV. It was so popular that the online traffic the game had garnered crashed the server that hosted the site the game was on, and eventually crashed their school's website as well. By the year 2006, the game had over 6 million visits and 600,000 plays, which is a massively impressive achievement. The game even got pitched to a Sony representative at the 2006 Game Developers Conference Student Showcase, but although the game had immense popularity, it was ultimately turned down. But this didn't deter the Cloud team. For what was supposed to be a short experiment, it was clear that the Cloud team had truly made something special, and 2 individuals of that team would be the ones to begin thinking beyond Cloud and what they could make going forward. Those 2 individuals being Genova Chen and Kellee Santiago, both of which decided to create their own game company in the middle of 2006 as they both began wrapping up their master's degrees. The company was appropriately named That Game Company, and was founded on a similar principle to when they were developing Cloud. To not focus on creating games solely focused on mechanics and gameplay, but rather create games focused on evoking and inspiring emotions within players, and to expand the spectrum of emotions video games evoke. And not too long after the founding of the company, they had entered into a deal with Sony to produce 3 games for their up-and-coming PSN service, as Sony had taken notice of another one of Chen's projects that was used for his master's thesis, which was titled Flow. Going forth, after now bringing Nick Clark, Chen's co-developer on Flow, and John Edwards, the 4 had now begun their own journey as they began to kick off development on their first title for Sony under That Game Company. With Santiago acting as the president and game producer of the company, Clark as their designer, and Edwards as their lead engineer, they were ready to kick things off. Unfortunately though, Chen was still working at the game studio Maxis at this time, helping develop their upcoming title Spore, and wouldn't be 100% involved with their game's development until their second title. And despite already founding the company and getting a deal contracted with Sony, they could not initially decide on what to develop for their first game. As previously mentioned, the contract had That Game Company to develop 3 titles for the, at the time, up-and-coming PSN service, which was Sony's attempt at delving into creating an online store for purchasing and downloading games. Originally, the team had thought about developing Cloud into a full game, but ultimately decided to go with developing Flow as it was much more fleshed out as a concept and would allow them to alleviate some of the early stresses of having a company. They also had brought on several contract workers to assist in the game's development, including Austin Wintory, an extremely talented composer, to compose the game's soundtrack. At this point in time, they were all fairly inexperienced when it came to building up a company and creating commercial games, so it seems reasonable for them to start off with something that has already been fleshed out and bring in contractors to aid in development, but ambition got the best of them. According to Kellee Santiago in an interview with GameIndustry.biz, she says this:
"We initially shifted from Cloud to Flow as our first title on PS3, because Flow was more fleshed out as a design, and an easier first project to tackle. There are so many challenges with just starting up a company and working with a publisher, and none of us had shipped a commercial title before. So we wanted to mitigate some of those challenges, though it still turned out to be much more than we bargained for. We'd initially scope a game twice as big that would take half as long, but that was just our own naivete. Apparently our producer at the time at Sony always knew we were being overambitious, so he went easy on us."
This led to the game being delayed from its initial November 2006 release date to February 2007, releasing at only half of their original vision for the entire experience. But despite being half of their original vision, the game released to much fanfare. It became the most downloaded game on the PSN store in 2007, received the award for Best Downloadable Game of the Year at the 2008 Game Developers' Choice Awards, was the finalist for multiple awards, and was the nominee for even more. Flow was even selected, along with 79 other games, to be a part of the Art of Video Games exhibit in the Smithsonian American Art Museum in 2012. And although it was a massive success, especially when it came to its art and aesthetic, Flow didn't impress those looking for gameplay, as critics and review outlets didn't really enjoy this side of the game, resulting in many 7 out of 10s and 70s from reviewers. Many did enjoy the visuals, the design, and the soundtrack of the game, as critics attributed the game to be more like an experience or an art piece, rather than a video game. I myself actually got to play this game back in the day, and I personally enjoyed it. Even now, just listening to its amazing soundtrack is enough to almost bring me to tears. I really don't think I appreciated the experience as much as I would today, but that's besides the point. I feel the criticism makes sense, but I personally don't think it holds too much weight, as the gameplay was never really the full focus of that game company. As we covered before, they are more focused on the emotion their games can evoke and inspire within their players. Of course, everyone has their own opinions and wants different things from their gaming experiences. But looking past the media outlets, it was apparent that the majority of players were captivated by Flow. Its beautiful visuals, simple gameplay, and absolutely astonishing and dynamic soundtrack all compounded to create a rather charming experience for its players. A large majority of people had fallen in love with Flow, and for that game company, according to Kellee Santiago, it felt validating.
Well, we iterated and playtested and we're very happy with the game that we shipped, but you're never sure if the world at large is going to be into your game. When Flow was fairly well received and then became one of the top downloaded games in 2007, that was incredible. The best word for it was that it was validating. It validated our process, our mission, all of the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into the game.
With all of its praises and success, a sizable amount of people were wanting the game to get ported over to the PSP, and Sony had taken notice. But according to Genova Chen in a now archived Gamasutra article, after finishing Flow, he and the rest of the team were all ready to move on to their next project.
Well, Sony decided maybe we should move it to PSP, but obviously you guys are not interested. And then they were like, well, you know, this group that we used to work with, they are really nice guys, and maybe we can get them to work on PSP for you. So basically we said, as long as our members are not distracted from the project, fine, if you want to do it.
Chen would go on to talk about the development of the game and how the PSP version, being developed by Supervillain Studios, had ultimately become its own version altogether. The game's original source code, assets, and etc. were all too powerful for the PSP, and more members of the original team began to have their hands in this newer version to aid in the creation of newer assets to adapt it over as best as they could. Chen also states that he actually had never played the PSP version of Flow, as he was incredibly focused on their next project, their first fully original IP.
We always start a game based on a feel that we want to accomplish, that we want the player to feel a certain way. But if I can't tell what that feel is, and if we are not going to that feel, it's like, oh, I just missed my progress, right?
The development process for that game company differs from many other game developers around, focusing on the emotions their game evokes and experimenting and expanding the spectrum of emotions that games can create. Instead of starting with a game concept and its mechanics and gameplay, then building up from there, a process that most other game studios undergo, that game company first decides on the emotions and feelings that they wish to bring about within their players and develops their game around that. Doing this allows them to truly succeed in their goal of creating experiences focused on the emotional impact and feelings brought about by their games, as their entire developmental process starts with deciding what emotions they wish to bring about. It's at the center of everything they do from then on within the game's creation. This still held true as that game company began development on their next title, Flower, a game inspired by the large expanses of nature that Chen had encountered during his move from Shanghai to California.
We started with this idea of wanting to create a game in which the player could just come home from maybe their busy day or stressful life and escape through their PlayStation 3 in their living room to a serene environment And the serene environment was inspired by our creative director, Genova, his experience in moving from Shanghai to California and seeing these expanses of nature that he had never been exposed to before, and wanting to give a taste of that feeling to other people who may not have access to it either.
The game was founded on wanting to provide a feeling of serenity, an escape from one's stressful life through the medium of the PS3. And with Chen being inspired by the beauty of nature, he began concepting and prototyping the game on his own as the rest of his team was finishing up with Flow. Once the team had finished up the work on Flow and joined Chen in working on Flower, Chen, already having started the prototyping, got everyone right to work to get things underway. After about a full 2 years of development, their newest IP, Flower, was completed. After about a full 2 years of development, Flower was completed, with more than half of the development time spent prototyping the game. The actual production time of Flower was about 6 months, which was of course after they settled on what the game was and was going to be. It was released to the public on the PSN store to the same, arguably higher acclaim as its predecessors, receiving Best Independent Game Fueled by Do Award in the 2009 Spike Video Game Awards, Best Indie Game of 2009 by Playboy, Casual Game of the Year by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, Best E3 Download Game from OneUp.com, Best Original Game from the UGO, Special Achievement for Innovation from IGN, and received multiple award nominations as well. Flower was even amongst the top 10 most downloaded games on the PSN store of that year. It also was chosen, alongside Flow, to be a part of the 2012 The Art of Video Games exhibit in the Smithsonian American Art Museum. But unlike Flow, in 2013, it was decided that it would remain as a permanent part of its exhibits and was even showcased there again in a different 2015 exhibition. For its beautiful soundtrack alone, composed by Vincent Diamante, who had worked with the team before on Cloud, had received the 2009 Best Original Soundtrack Award from G4, won the Best Interactive Score Award from the Game Audio Network Guild, and was even nominated for their Music of the Year Award. Flower had even won the hearts of critics and review outlets this time around, as scores were significantly better than any of the games that had come before it, receiving 8 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, 90s, and 80s, and top scores all around. Flower was huge, and I absolutely understand why. Just like Flow, I had played this game back in the day, but although I enjoyed it then, I really didn't appreciate all that it was during that time. I don't even think I finished it. So, I played it again. But this time on the PC, and honestly, the experience was fantastic. The soundtrack was wondrous, the visuals equally so, and the one thing I wish I knew before replaying for this video was how to set up motion controls with a DualShock to play it how it originally was on the PS3. It wasn't until afterwards that I found out that I could do this, and I 100% recommend playing it like this, especially since it was how the game was originally designed to be played. Flying around, seeing these vast plains with the breeze blowing by, as you grab pedal after pedal as they sound off a unique sound that mimics that of instruments and vocals, and it all culminates to create a beautiful experience that genuinely can't be understood until you've played it. And at least for me, it seems that that's a trend with games created by that game company. Watching a video or having a streamer or a let's player played in front of you just doesn't really feel the same. Yes, watching these visuals and hearing this music and even having someone to share that experience with is great, but I personally feel their experiences are unlike anything else when experienced firsthand. But I digress. Flower is an amazing game, and was a worthy second title for That Game Company to add to their growing catalog of games that they've developed. Although Flow and Flower were huge successes and provided their own challenges, it would be their third game that would be their true test.
The goal was to create a game where people felt they're connected with each other, to show the positive side of humanity in them. A lot of games today have a list of quests, places to go, items to collect, and rewards to receive. We just ignore each other.
The current team over at That Game Company, being a total of about 7 at the time, had begun work on their third and final game of their contract with Sony. But just from the start, the development of this one would prove to be much different than their previous titles. First, Kellee Santiago would not be acting as the game's producer this time around, as she would be focused on her role as the active president of the company, and Robin Hunick, who was fresh off of working at EA as a producer for Boombox Bash Party, would be brought in to act in her place. Second, the team was expanding greatly, from 7 to 18 people, and even this seemed to possibly be too little of a crew, as the expected development time of a year was not able to be met, and they were granted a year extension on the game's development.
We were addicted to just-in-time extensions. The fact of the matter is, we signed an unrealistic schedule believing in our heart of hearts it would probably be extended later, and we paid for that stress in the entire project. We had eyes that were much bigger than our stomachs. While we were iterating, there were many ideas that we checked. They just didn't seem right. Being attached to those features and ideas, but being unwilling to expand the team or the process in ways that made them feasible in a realistic period of time was very costly to us.
This third project was quickly becoming much bigger than intended, and ideas weren't sticking. The team just wasn't able to figure out what they wanted to do, or how they wanted to do it. And since the team was getting to be bigger than any team they had before it, according to Hunick, it opened the door to miscommunication. As mentioned before, greed was beginning to take hold, and in a game studio founded on the idea of having input from everyone, many concepts, ideas, and features were probably coming up as fast as they were getting put aside. Hunick states that they would get attached to said ideas and features, and would be unwilling to make the adjustments necessary to actually make it possible, and this created internal tension amongst the team.
Not only did it wear down individual people on the team who felt the burden of being pressured to perform way more than they actually could, it eroded trust in the creative leadership of the game because it sounded crazy.
But things unfortunately would prove to not get any easier for the developers at That Game Company, as they were not able to meet their next deadline after the extension granted to them by Sony. They were unsatisfied with the product. The emotions they wanted to evoke weren't there. So they asked Sony for another extension, and Sony, probably knowing the quality of title that this team can create if given enough time, granted them one last extension. With now receiving their final extension, the pressure was probably higher than it ever was to try and get the ball rolling. Time and money were seemingly not on their side, as the team were running out of both, leading to them having less overtime, and were even prepared to work with a skeleton crew and skip out on pay to finish this project. Eventually, the team learned to put their tensions and frustrations aside and to let go of ideas and concepts that weren't working and push forward. Hunick stated, "We gave ourselves permission to be human, to have lives, to sleep." The solution to all of this, according to Hunick, was to simply be nice to each other. After all of this, after nearly going bankrupt, their third project, aptly named Journey, was released to the PSN store on March 13th, 2012. And although the game had basically broken the company, it had become a massive success. Not only had the game become the fastest selling game on the PSN store in North America and Europe, but received the Best Downloadable Game Award from multiple review outlets, won 8 separate awards at the DICE Awards, including Game of the Year, and was nominated for several other awards as well. And of course, its soundtrack, composed by Austin Wintory, who had worked on the soundtrack for Flow, had quite a bit of recognition as well. receiving several awards as well as being the first ever video game to be nominated for Best Score Soundtrack for Visual Media at the 2013 Grammy Awards. The list goes on and on and on for the nominations, awards, and recognition this game has received, and it doesn't stop here. Review outlets and critics had given Journey near perfect scores with 90s and 9 out of 10s, with some 10 out of 10s sneaking in there as well. Fans, critics, the whole world was enthralled by the beautiful piece of art that Game Company had poured their blood, sweat, and tears into. They had managed to craft an experience so beautiful that is still talked about today. It's still played today. It is still here today. But after the game's release, Sony's contract came to an end, and that Game Company began work on their next independent title. But many people began to leave, such as Robin Hunick, who would go on to co-found Funimenta. Kellee Santiago, Genova Chen's co-founder who was there from the very start, was also another to leave in pursuit of more opportunities. Chen accredits the mass amount of people leaving to the lack of money. They had burned through almost everything on Journey and its development. It also could be attributed to the extremely rough development cycle of the game itself, but there's no way to truly know for sure. But once the revenue from Journey had finally come in, many previous employees were brought back, as development on a new unannounced game would be underway and eventually released as Sky Children of Light, which is their current flagship title that is still receiving content and updates as of now. And now that I've sort of summarized the history of that Game Company, I want to divert just a bit and go back to Journey and talk about its influences on me and the rest of the world. It's around the year of 2013, and I've recently gotten a PS3. As some of you may know, my early days of gaming after my PS2 were mostly on the Xbox 360, playing games mostly for their competitive and multiplayer aspects. I got almost every Halo for its multiplayer, got almost every new Call of Duty released, played to hell and back Street Fighter 4, and would always be looking for the next game that my friends were on or playing, who were actually a few years older than me, so I probably just wanted to fit in with them. The whole reason I even got an Xbox 360 in the first place was to play with them. But when I got my PS3, I didn't have any friends to play with. But my first game on that console was still the original Black Ops, because at this point it's all I really knew and wanted to play. Hell, even when I dabbled into single player on Xbox, I was very limited with what I wanted, as I'd want games as satisfying as the multiplayer ones I was playing before. But I would ultimately find myself going back to playing what I just would normally. There would even be times I just sit and wait for people to come online to play Call of Duty. I enjoyed myself, no doubt, but it was clear I had fallen into a metaphorical hole when it came to the type of games I played. This all changed when I wanted to get a new game on my PS3, which at this point I hadn't really been playing because why would I play Call of Duty on a console where I couldn't interact with my friends? So I went to the game store to see what kind of games there were. I remember picking up about 3 different games, those being Final Fantasy XIII, Infamous, and the Journey collection. I grabbed Final Fantasy XIII because a friend of mine had talked about it, I randomly grabbed Infamous from the pre-owned bin, and I picked up the Journey collection for the special themes and icons you get with it. I played FF13 and wound up not liking it. Infamous I found fun, but not enough to finish it, and after redeeming my rewards, it was time to play the Journey collection. I started with Flow, and thought it was enjoyable, but I moved on. Flower, as I mentioned before, I thought was really beautiful, but never got around to finishing it. Then it came time to play Journey, and this is where things changed for me. At first, I was confused, but I was captivated by the visuals of the game and spent my first few moments just exploring. I played through and eventually encountered a player, confusing them to be an NPC, and simply just moved along as they followed eagerly behind. As I continued to play, I felt myself become more and more involved, all the way up until the end, and all I could think about was a simple question that ran through my head. Video games can be like this? It was at this point that my view of video games had completely shifted, and I now became aware of the ditch I had dug myself into, and I wanted out. I began exploring more games on the online store, playing the single-player stories of the games I had already owned, and began looking at games for their experiences rather than their multiplayer aspects. I of course still played those multiplayer games, but I began becoming more versed in other titles, some of which I can thank my cousin for introducing them to me. Asura's Wrath, Patapon, Epic Mickey, Klonoa, Project X Zone, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, The Dishwasher, Skyrim, Persona, Spectrobes, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, The Last of Us, Uncharted, Disgaea, God Eater, Monster Hunter, Borderlands, Fallout, Dead Rising, Sunset Overdrive, One Finger Death Punch, Dead Island, and so many more titles were quickly coming into my radar. I no longer wanted a game where I was focused on becoming the best. I wanted a game where I could explore and craft a story and experience a new journey. To this day, I know I've missed out on so many amazing games, and I know that I won't be able to experience them all. But I continue to try and experience all I can, and I continue to broaden my horizons on new games. With that, I can attribute my personal renaissance for gaming to That Game Company and the experiences Journey has provided for me. I've gone back and played this game multiple times for this video and in my free time, finding all the sigils and even collecting my white robe, a signifier of mastery and learning, and after so many years since I first played it as well. Journey has touched the lives of millions, creating a massive community of individuals who have come together under their love for this game's creators. I even came across one such community from a subreddit while researching for this video, and have even joined the public Discord server. Everyone is here because of their love for this game and the experiences that it has provided for them, creating weekly events such as Scarfless Saturday or Silent Sunday to keep members engaged in the game that they love. To see such an active community for this 10-year-old game is amazing. From art, community creations, cosplay, video essays, and more is so beautiful. Everyone here has been touched by Journey in some fashion, and Journey means something to each person. Even while going back to play Journey and reflecting on what it's done for me, I've reflected on its overall meaning for me as well. Journey, for me, is a metaphor for the journeys that we take in our lives. That first step, it's us taking the plunge into tackling whatever that journey may be. Whether it be a hobby, applying for a new job, going through education, life itself, or even as small as getting yourself out of bed that morning, even if you don't want to. No matter how big or small our journeys are, they are journeys nonetheless, and there may be people we come across on our journeys as our roads cross and our paths begin to intertwine and we travel forth into the uncertain, seeing the summit overhead. The goal. Our goal is right there in sight at all times as we trek on, and there will be beautiful moments along the way, moments that we will even be able to share with those we encounter along our journey. There will be moments where we feel so close, so powerful, as nothing can seem to stop us from achieving our goals, and then there will be moments where we are uncertain, where we are scared and can't see the light, where the summit is out of sight and we don't know how we will manage. But we persevere nonetheless, finding hope and pushing forth. Even when we are at our lowest of lows, we can still get up. We can help each other up and push on. As we continue to fly on forth, remembering the memories we made along the way, remembering the people that we met along the way, remembering our journey to this point, all the way to the summit. And it is there that we finally find ourselves looking down, looking back at everything, and reminisce as we enter into the light. We focused on the feeling. We knew the destination. It was in our hearts from the very beginning. If you've made it this far, I now want to thank you for joining me on this journey through the game that changed me and the history of that game company. Our paths, for one reason or another, have crossed, and I couldn't be happier to have you alongside me through it. I also want to thank all of my subscribers for not only joining me in this journey, but my journey through YouTube. And if you aren't subscribed and enjoyed this video, subscribe and ring the bell to join us in this journey as well. But if you don't wish to, thank you for coming along, and I hope our paths may cross again one other time. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to Mistress, my friend and my partner, for doing their readings of the quotes of Kellee Santiago, Genova Chen, and Robin Hunick. I'd also like to extend a quick thank you to my friends who had given me input, motivation, and encouragement through the creation of this video. This whole video has been one that I knew I'd make one day, and I've spent many hours, days, weeks, and months to make this as great as I possibly could. And I hope it shows. And as usual, my name is CrossVee. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope to see you all next time. Peace.